Hi, everyone. Welcome to 2022. It's been so good to see so many familiar faces. They just pop into the kitchen while Chef Brandon here is cooking. So thank you so much for joining us today. And while you do that, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Sylvia Ng, and I created Chefs for Chef, and it's become kind of like a passion project on the side for me. So basically, I'm teaming up with my awesome and talented chef friends, like our very own Chef Brandon Henry here. And we're offering virtual cooking classes to all of you so that we can raise money and raise awareness for a charity or organization. So hello, everyone. You're more than welcome to cook along with us, or if you just want to sit back, relax, and take in all the information, we can send you the replay afterwards. So without any further ado, let me just say that I am so happy and so thankful to welcome our guest chef, Brandon Henry. Yay! Brandon was born on the island of St. Lucia and moved to New York City over 20 years ago. And he graduated from college with a bachelor's in hospitality management with a focus on culinary arts. He currently works as a culinary program supervisor with Children's Aid Society and works with foster care youth on career readiness and job placement assistance, which is how we know each other. So he also does chef work with Zwilling J.A. Henkel's, yes, like the knives, and the Country Table in Greenwich, Connecticut, and with private clients around New York and Connecticut. So very exclusive. You got to get Brandon when he has time. So thank you. Brandon has a huge heart and he has a passion for being in the kitchen and creating delicious meals for others. And over the years, he's developed a great love for helping underserved youth and communities, which is one of the reasons why I knew I wanted to ask him to come on board, because if you know Brandon, you know he just has this big heart and he cares so much for people and for food. So let's put our hands together and please welcome Brandon. We're so happy to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah. So if you can just tell us a little bit about the cause that you're cooking for today and why it's important to you.
Yeah, I choose No Kid Hungry because as you mentioned, Sylvia, I work in a company where we serve foster youth. And I mean, to me, it touched home a lot more over the last couple of years with the pandemic, where folks in the community just didn't have anything to eat. And my time at NGC at Children's Aid, we work with young people. I've seen the need itself, firsthand about food insecurity for our young people sometimes. And my time here, I just felt like I needed to do more for the community and our young people, which is why I chose No Kid Hungry, because I mean, across America, we have kids going to school. We have breakfast in the mornings. We have kids coming home to no lunch in the evening. We have kids, like every day of the week, just starving, like in America. Which to me, this doesn't make sense because this is a very rich country. But to do my part, I figure I would donate what we got today to that cause, because I mean, it's heartbreaking to see kids find a fresh fruit, or like it's a meal in the morning or the evening. So yeah. I love what I do. I would like to raise money for them because I mean, it sounds cliche, but the kids are our future.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you out there who don't know, No Kid Hungry is a national campaign that was launched in 2010. And it's run by the nonprofit Share Our Strength, which works towards, ending child hunger. And they support, lots of different federal programs like SNAP and WIC and the National School Breakfast, Lunch, Snack programs. And they provide grants to like food banks and schools and community groups. So they do a lot of work on legislative action, kind of like advocating for food assistance policies. And they work with chefs, celebrities, companies, media partners, just to spread awareness. So most of you out there who maybe don't know me, I've worked for a lot of nonprofit hunger relief organizations in schools. So hunger is such an important issue to me too, so especially among kids. So there's really no excuse for, I think the latest statistic was about 13 million children in the US are food insecure. And there's really no excuse for it, And so thank you, Brandon, for highlighting No Kid Hungry for us today. And so let us know what you are cooking to support them today and why you chose this recipe.
So, I mean, I'm West Indian, right? You guys probably hear the accent. I'm from St. Lucia. I moved over here 22 years ago. beautiful island, you know, sunny, 85 degrees every day, the beach. I moved to New York for my opportunity. But the dish I picked today is a soup because back home, like every day we eat soups. It's like a very traditional thing to do back home. Before every meal, we have a soup to eat. If we go to dinner on a Sunday, there's always soup as a first course. Then we have our meal. So today I'm making like a red bean and coconut soup with pumpkin. Very straightforward, very easy. I mean, today is going to be a vegan or a vegetarian meal. We could definitely add like chicken or pork or beef if you wanted to the actual dish to make it more hearty. So that's my dish. Like I said, I love soups. So I'm in New York. It's cold out here today. So I figured soup would probably be the best thing to do to make also because the weather outside, it says it's 29 degrees right now. So
Yeah.
that's my
and it's snowing where I am, so that would be perfect.
There you go.
But you told me this is your grandma's recipe, right?
Yeah. So my grandma, like when I go back home, she always made it every like Saturdays, and now I watch her do it all the time, but I never really like watched enough to know what she put in there. So when I asked her, hey, like what do you put in there? She would tell me like the basic stuff, like obviously beans and like, you know, pumpkin and celery, but it always tastes so good when she made it. When I made it myself, it wasn't the same. So I figured this one, I'll make my own way, put my spin on it, kind of like honor her and what she did for us growing up.
Oh, sweet. And what was her name?
I call her Ma. My name is Nyola.
Ah, sweet. I love that. Chef Brandon takes grandma's, home cooked recipe and he doctors it up to make it his own. I mean, that's kind of like how our cultural traditions, really pass on, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, maybe you can teach Noah to cook it.
Exactly. So, I mean, I can show you what's in there. You know, this is a soup where you don't have to make it like exactly I made it. You could add stuff to it, take stuff out. And so we're going to go over the different ingredients in there. So over here, we have our beans, as you can see over here. I use some pink beans today. You can use red beans also. There's great difference. We have coconut milk that I have already opened up. And aromatics, we have onions, we have thyme, we have celery, obviously our pumpkin that we're going to be using today. We have some carrots, and I also bought a nice bunch of spinach to add to it. I love spinach. We have, of course, some garlic. And we have this spice, this allspice, the berry. I'll show you what it looks like on the inside. You can buy it this way, or you buy the ground allspice. It's the exact same thing, but that one we keep it whole. And we also have some nice organic bay leaf in here to use in the recipe, and some salt and pepper for seasoning. That's pretty much what it is. Like I said, if you want to like add more stuff to it, you definitely can. If you want to add, like I said, some beef or some chicken, or even maybe some seafood in there. Actually, I think would probably be great also if you don't eat any, if you're pescatarian. So that's pretty much what the dish looks like as far as the ingredients. And like with most soups and stews, pretty straightforward, right? Everything gets chopped up into the correct sizes, or goes into a pot, covered with some stock or some water. It's like cooked down. The longer it cooks, the better it gets. I think the stews are very basic and easy thing to do. I think anybody could do it once you have the right ingredients. So we'll start kind of like breaking stuff down, and I'll show you different cuts on how I do it, and you have to follow along as I go. So the first thing we'll do is gonna get our celery chopped up. So what I always do is I wash everything first before I use it. If it's dirty on the inside, like this is dirty, wash it really quick. So we have our celery over here. So that what we do for the celery. then to a bunch. I'll take the bottom off. I don't really need this part of the celery. I really want the nice green stalks. And for this dish, because it's a stew, I want like nice big chunks. I don't want very small pieces, but it cooks for a very long time. So I want nice big chunks. So this is a very small stalk of celery. So I keep it whole, tie them together, and nice, maybe about a quarter-inch in size. This way.
Yeah, any smaller than that, it might kind of disappear into the soup and disintegrate.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll show you what I do also. So part of the soup we'll puree, and I'll show you what it looks like after we do it. Get like a nice, like smooth texture, but I'll also leave some in there, the soup itself, for some texture. So you have our celery chopped up. Next is our onions, the same size, like a nice, probably like a medium dice, or maybe a large dice actually. This way, maybe one this way, chop down. You have like a nice large dice of onions. This over here. Next is our pumpkin that we use. It's called calabaza pumpkin. Really good. I usually get it. It's really very cheap. I think this piece cost about $3. So a little bit goes a very long way. You don't need much of it. This one, the exact same thing. Be careful because it's a lot more fibrous, hard to cut. So sharp knife. As you can see, it's very tough to cut. And once I get it like broken down into smaller pieces, I'll cut these pieces into about like an inch size. This is what we call like a mise en place. So in restaurant business, this is where like all of the hard labor goes to, and like chopping stuff up. Because once you get everything chopped up and broken down, the cooking is very simple, very easy at that point. And this last piece, we'll chop up, right? Put it to the side. Next is our carrots, which we will peel them and peel them inside out.
Brandon, I kind of know that pumpkin has a different name. It's like kaboka squash or something like that. I always mispronounce it, I think. But is there any other kind of squash or pumpkin you could recommend if they can't find that one in the store?
I mean, you could actually use, if you want to use like the regular run-of-the-mill, what's the, I'm putting a blank right now.
Like
but you could actually, butternut squash, be was in there if you wanted to. That'll also be really good also, butternut squash. I mean, honestly, you could even add potatoes in there, sweet potatoes in there as a substitute for this. You can add it in there. I think these two are probably the most common thing you could find in the stores.
Yeah.
So butternut squash, if you can't find this pumpkin, or you could use potatoes in there also as an option. Be a different flavor a little bit, but it wouldn't change it that much, because what you really want to get is actually the beans and the coconut milk are the two dominant flavors in there. With the pumpkin, you get a little bit of sweetness from the pumpkin in the soup.
Yeah.
So if you can't find this pumpkin, you definitely use butternut squash also. That one's very easy to find.
Or a sweet potato, maybe.
Sweet potatoes, yes. That's also, you can use that also as a substitute for the pumpkin.
Cool, great.
So next you have our carrots. We'll kind of peel the outside portion off. That's gonna get nice and clean. And like I said, the chops doesn't really matter as far as how you cut them. If you want to do, like for the carrots, if you want like the circles like this, that's fine also. If you want to cut it in half the long way, be careful when you cut to this round. At this point, you want to cut in half moon shapes. That's fine also. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's what you like. It is your soup you're making, so it doesn't have to be this way. It's my my point. So we have most of our stuff already chopped up. We have this to the side. The last one to cut up is actually our garlic, which is, I love garlic. I think anything you put garlic in just tastes better to me.
Totally.
I'm a big fan of garlic. So garlic will chop up about 3 cloves. Get the outside portion chopped off. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. We're happy to answer them for you.
Totally.
So
And I would say even
I was
shallots could be good in this too, right? Like,
yeah, shallots could be good in there. So we use red onions in there. Take shallots in there. You can use Vidalia onions in there. It's really, there's no, I think the main things is obviously the beans that you want to definitely use some red or pink beans in there, and the coconut milk. The 2 definite things you want to use in there. Everything else you could add to it or take it out. Like in my class with the kids I have in the center, I always say cooking is one of the things that it's really up to your taste. Unlike baking, where you follow a recipe because it's a science, cooking is really up to you. So if I don't like onions, I can take that in there. If I love onions, I could add twice the amount of onions I have in there because I love onions. You could add peppers in there if you want to. You could add potatoes in there if you want to. You could add squash, zucchini in there at some point in the cooking. It's really up to you and how you like it, and you go from there. I always talk the exact same thing. It's really up to your taste and what you like.
and that's the big thing about cooking, right? It's like you got to know what you like, and then you got to just test it out in the kitchen. You know, it's another thing when you are cooking for other people, though. You know, family members, people with allergies, picky eaters. You know, so you kind of have to take that in mind too.
And I have a son who's a picky. I'm a chef, but he's a very picky eater. So I have to like cook stuff that he likes. So once again, it's really up to your flavor. But funny, he likes spice also. He's he likes spicy stuff, so which is weird to me. So I cook stuff with a little bit of spice for him because he likes it. And we have some thyme over here. So we have we can see our garlic, some thyme, some carrots, pumpkin, onions, and celery. That's pretty much like the base of our stew. Next in the steps, I actually bought some beef broth. You can see I heated it up just a little bit. Organic, low sodium beef broth. You could definitely add, if you want, in there some water. But I think if you could find beef broth or even vegetable broth, definitely buy it because it adds more flavor to the dish. If I put water in there, that's fine also. But you want to add flavor to your dish. So I prefer if you would buy like a nice low sodium beef broth or vegetable broth or chicken broth if you could find it in the store. Which nowadays is pretty common, pretty regular now to find like low sodium organic beef, different broths. So I would definitely recommend buying a beef broth to add to your soup because it's more flavor in there.
Yeah.
If you want to be ambitious and make your own broth or stock, you can do that also. It's a long process, but I think it's very rewarding if you cook a lot. All you have to do, a big pot, some bones in there, some aromatics, like everything you see there except the squash goes into your bones, cover it with water, cook for about 5 hours, and there you have it. That this is like it's just a stock. You can use it like to make rice, to make different things. When you stock in that particular dish, now you have your own chicken or vegetable or beef broth. It's very, very simple recipe for making broth. So now that we have this, we'll start to cook now. So I will start with some olive oil in the bottom of the pan. right? Keep it over the pan. So now we heat on. So once you get the heat on, the oil nice, you get it over it. So now we're gonna add all our aromatics. Our celery, onions, our squash, our garlic. Everything goes into the pot to begin the process of cooking. And what I would not do right now is add salt to it, because the broth has some salt already in there. So I wouldn't add salt just yet. And
Yeah, that's a good tip, because once you add it in there, you can't really take it out.
yeah, exactly. Once you add it in, you can't take it out. What you have to do is keep adding water to it, and at that point, everything kind of goes out of whack. So I wait to add the salt towards like the end of the dish. So tonight heat up a little bit. So it already smells good. Everything in there. I would add 1 bay leaf to there.
Just remember to take
So
the
the very
babies
top.
out when you eat when you eat the soup.
Yeah, exactly. Just be careful. 1 bay leaf in there, and I'm gonna add maybe about 3 or 4 of the pimento or allspice seeds in there. And that's pretty much it. That's gonna add to the. So once everything is warmed up, I'm gonna add my beans with the liquid in there. That's all flavor you added to it. Right?
Brandon, do you think other beans in this stew would work well too? Or maybe a
Yeah,
mix
I
of
think-
beans?
If you was kidney beans, honestly, I think it was any big ones already. You can use black beans in there. Obviously, it'll be a black bean soup at that point.
Mhm.
So I think kidney beans. This is the pink beans. Obviously, if you use black beans in there. So I mean, it's different variations of it. Maybe like a lentil.
Oh yeah,
Like
that
a
sounds
lentil
good.
soup in there. I mean, I do very different with lentil though, because lentil will be faster than other beans. So, but any bean in there that you like, you definitely add it in there. Once again, it's up to what you like. For certain beans, the time to cook is a little bit different than others. So we be mindful about that. So now we have our beans in there. We're gonna cover this with the stock that we have.
And you said you warmed up the stock beforehand. Is that just to make it cook faster?
That's pretty much, yeah. I mean, you can add cold stock to it. But if you add warm stock, it gets cooked a lot faster. But it takes like 10 minutes off cooking time. If you add like, the warm stock to it. I always recommend, like, if you make anything that needs like a hot liquid, like a liquid, just warm it up, because it makes things a lot faster if you do it that way. So this is in there right now. So very, very, very important. I would not add the milk just yet. I want to get everything cooked most of the way before I add the coconut milk in there. Otherwise, it may separate, it may curdle the milk. So be mindful about that also.
And you didn't put the thyme in there just yet, right?
Thyme is already in there. So I put the thyme, everything goes in the butter. Everything in the pot in the beginning. Then I added the beans, and I will stock or water, whatever you're using. Then it comes to a boil. When it comes to a boil, I give it a quick taste for enough salt. So you can see how it looks this way. It's not really just there yet. So at a certain point, I'll take out about a half, actually quarter of it and puree the entire thing and add it back in there for some nice like creamy texture. Once the squash and everything kind of gets soft, and so the beans, I will puree the entire thing and what half of it I say, and then add it back in there. And at that point, I'll add the milk to it. And if you want to add shrimp, or if you want to add chicken or beef, I would add it after I puree the like a quarter of it. I'll add the meats to it, then cover that down with like a medium-low heat. That could down for a very long time. If you add beef, obviously maybe about an hour of cooking time to get very, very tender. If you use chicken, maybe about a half hour. Depends on like the cut of chicken that you use. If you use chicken thighs, it's a little bit longer. Or chicken breast cooks very, very fast. So about a half hour for chicken to 35 minutes. If I add maybe shrimp in there, probably about 10, 12 minutes for the shrimp cook through. So it's really like what you like and you can add in there at this point. This is like pretty much like a base for a really good soup. And then you could add different things to it. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much like, you know, what we do back home. I mean, from the islands, you get like fresh herbs and stuff I can't find in America. My grandma would add to her stuff back home. But obviously, you know, in New York, you can't find certain things. So I have to improvise in different ways to make it taste as similar as possible to my grandma's red bean stew or soup.
Yeah, that sounds great. Oh, I do have a question. Do you think tofu would work in here in this recipe if you wanted to make it vegan?
Yeah, so so I did up two ways, right? To use a tofu. If you actually puree a tofu, puree a tofu, instead of having the coconut milk, you got that tofu that's pureed up. It's like a milky consistency and add it in there as opposed to add the coconut milk. Or you get some very firm tofu, chop it in very small pieces, like an inch size or half an inch size, and add it in there. Like if you were to add chicken breast, you tofu the exact same way. So I can think about doing two different ways. As a puree, the tofu into the milky texture and add it in there for that milky texture. Make it mouthfeel, or like I said, cut it into small cubes and add it in there as your like meat substitute, pretty much.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I have a personal question because, you know, I don't really cook meat. How do you know, like, you know, when you throw in, let's say you're using beef or chicken or whatever, how do you know when it's done in the stew versus overcooking it? Like, how could you tell? Is there a way? I mean, if it's still raw, you don't want to eat it. So
So I think for you can move the camera view a little bit. So I think for beef, so if you want to use like a chuck or so I did last time. I think I used ribeye. I think with beef, you really can't overcook it because beef, like the more it cooks, it gets very, very tender. So I would. So when I did at home, I did it maybe an hour and a half for the beef. You want to get very, very tender if you use beef. So the longer you go, the better it gets for the beef as far as cook time. With chicken, if you use the dark meat portions of the chicken, like the leg and thigh, that also maybe about 45 minutes to an hour. I won't go past the hour because other than that, you have to shred in the soup. You don't really want that, but it's also not bad if you shred it a little bit. So for dark meat, I'll go about 45 minutes. That's the leg and the thigh. If it's off the bone, if it's on the bone, 45 minutes to about an hour for cook time. If it's off the bone, a little bit less time. So about 45 minutes till it's done. That's for dark meat. For white meat, which is the breasts and the wing, about a half hour. But it also depends on the chunks of the meat that you're cooking. It's about an inch in size for the white meat, probably about 25 minutes to about a half hour. For the dog meat, if you want to cut it like about the same size, about an inch, inch and a half in pieces, probably about 35 to 45 minutes for dog meat. So that's a time limit for different things. So for beef and for pork also, you want to go a little bit longer. The longer you go, it gets more and more tender as you go. So for both the beef and the pork, I would go about an hour and a half of cook time. For dog meat chicken, about 45 minutes to an hour, depends if it's on the bone or off the bone. And for the white meat, which is the breast and the leg, and the breast and the wing, sorry, about a half hour for cook time. For shrimp, maybe about 15 minutes tops for shrimp. Because shrimp, if you cook it for too long, it gets very, very rubbery. You don't really want that. So what I would do actually for shrimp, I would put it in there for 5 minutes with the heat on, turn the heat off, cover the pot, so that it's sitting there. And that way, the heat from the soup itself cook the shrimp through.
Yeah, that's a great idea. You know, for the beef and the pork, doesn't it matter like which cuts you use though? Because I mean,
so,
some of them, if you cook too long, then it kind of does. Wouldn't it get tough at all, or what?
Yeah, so for stuff like that, I probably wouldn't use like a very high quality cut of beef. I'll probably use like a chuck or the top round to for the beef for that for this one. For pork, I'll use like the pork butt, which is fatty, a lot of muscles in there. So I probably would not use like a loin to put in there for pork or beef, because it's, first of all, the loin has not much flavor in there and cook super quick because there's no fat, there's no muscles in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use a more like rough cut for the beef and the pork if I want to make it in that soup. So definitely like a chuck, which is like a very, cook for a very, very long time. If for beef, for pork, I would probably use like a pork butt, cut in small pieces, obviously, to add to this to cook. But
Great,
for the pork and the beef, you want to go too far with it, because like the chicken, eventually you'll kind of get this pull apart too much and get too tender, which is a thing. So about an hour and a half for both of them.
cool. Thanks, Brandon. And I know I saw on the list of ingredients, I saw you put on a Scotch bonnet pepper. I didn't know if you were going to throw that into the soup or not, or if you did, when would you add it in?
So I took off the menu because I was on the menu of the recipe because I couldn't find a nice. I went to the supermarket, I couldn't find what I wanted. But once again, it's optional. You could add it in if you want. If you like spice, you could add it in there. So if I did do this Scotch bonnet, I would add it in now, but I wouldn't chop it up though. I'd add the entire thing whole, then eventually push it out. If I want like this, like a hint of spice. Like if I love spice, I would leave it in there and puree it. Eventually, everything else for a nice kick. I like spice a lot, so I would leave mine in there and puree it up for a nice kick. But I would add it in the dish like right now as it's going. I would add it in there then to the dish.
Sounds good. You know, I don't really eat a whole lot of spice. Is there like an alternative less spicy pepper that you would recommend?
I mean, you could definitely use like I think if you want to use like chili flakes, you could add that in there because you could add some as you like. Maybe jalapeno, but these also. I mean, but what you can do is like, because I love the habanero pepper. Sorry, I love the pepper. Right. So what you can do is maybe cut it in a third or a quarter or a half and add that in there. If you don't want too much spice in your dish. Also, you could add maybe some Tabasco at some point. Once the dish is all done, everything is pretty much all ready to go. Add a couple dashes of Tabasco in there if you want. But not very, very spicy. So that's also an option if you want to do that. But I like spice, so I gotta go heavy-handed in the spice for mine with the peppers, which is great. Like I said, I'm from an island where it's, like I said, it's 85 degrees and pretty much year round and hot. but we also like spice also. So it's one of those weird things that in the Caribbean you would think that, oh, you like very like fresh stuff. We do. We also love chicken soups and red bean soup.
Yeah, I heard that a lot of the spicy peppers and things like that, it actually helps you sweat more in the Caribbean, which you need. So it's very humid out there. So cool. Thanks for all those tips, Brandon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially if you're cooking for a family where like a lot of younger kids might not like spice, you might have to start out without any spice. And then if you like it, you know, extra spicy, you got to tailor it to your own taste buds, because otherwise your kids are they're gonna be crying if you start off with too spicy.
Yeah, but we like I said back home, this is normally the first course for if you have like dinner on a Sunday at my aunt's house, my uncle's house. There's always some soup on the fire going for our first intro to the meal, and I always love that. And open your palate up, so we gotta eat some good stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great. I feel like I would totally have like a side of rice or something and make it a main course. Make it like a stew and a side of rice and call it a day for me.
In the so I have friends who from Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, so they eat their chicken soup with rice, and so like at back home that was never a thing for us. So I would find it very not weird, because obviously everybody has their own thing, but I never really understood the rice. I never really not like it, but soup to us back in St. Lucia is always like by itself, right? So but in different cultures, folks would eat this with rice on the side, which like you said, so you make like actually like a whole dish, which is to me it's pretty cool, because it's very similar to like burgers and rice down in Louisiana.
Yeah,
it's very similar to that. So if I add some rice to it, so see how like these different cultures have their own thing, but you can see the links between each culture, how you do stuff. So in DR or Puerto Rico, this should be with some rice on the side. If I go to Louisiana, that'll be red beans and rice with some smoked turkey in there, or some smoked ham in there, whatever it is, with rice on the side. Back in the Caribbean, it will be just this by itself. With, like I said, we could add beans in there. So we could add corn on the cob itself, cut in small pieces, add in there towards the end of the cooking process. We also add plantains in there, the green one, not the right one.
Oh, yeah.
The green ones in there. We also add we call it figs or green bananas. We add it there also, cut into small, like really good incised pieces, and add it in there. So it's like I said, it's like a blank canvas at this point, and how you doctor it up with the different things is really up to you.
Yeah, and I really like that cross-cultural connection. It's like each culture has their own interpretation of what like soup is, or like, what their sides are. And yeah, I love that actually. But you can tell that there's so many influences across the world, from country to country. It's amazing.
So if you would so actually, so Rico is like a bouillon. That's what we call it back home. So it's a French word. So if you like chicken bouillon, that's what we call this, like a bouillon.
Yeah, not the cube.
Not the cube. No, there's no cube in there. So I would kind of, it's very similar to like if you could talk like the Dominican culture, very similar to a sancocho. They're very similar to one another. That's very like thick, heavy stew with different things in there that you eat when it's cold, like today. That's what I would kind of like reference it to if you expand it.
Totally. The first time I heard of sancocho, it was actually while I was working at CAS. And we had one of the kids that I was working with over at Rhodes. He was actually the one who told me about sancocho, and he was, I was trying to get them to come up with different ideas, you know, things that they cook at home, things that they want to learn how to cook. And he had never cooked it before, but he'd seen his grandmother cook it. And so he's like, can we learn how to cook this? I was like, totally. And so we made a sancocho, you know, in our science lab. That was our kitchen. But yeah, I loved it. I was like, I love when they, you know, bring that taste of home, and then they introduce me to new things. So I loved working with it. So
yeah, they're very similar to one another. Like I said, that cross-cultural connection that we all have. It seems sometimes we are so separate when it comes to cultures. When we see our foods, they're so similar. Like I've seen stuff that from different cultures, like very much like what we do back home. And it tells you how much we are so connected from different places in the world by our foods. It could be just like one spice that's kind of off what they do. It could be how they do it, but the end result is very much like what we have back in our culture. Like I was saying with this, is like, this is what we call bouillon, but if you look down south Louisiana, this is very similar to red beans and rice. So I love just like these different connections. So at that point, you see, we come over, Tyler. Bring over the camera. So you see how it looks a little bit thicker now, the soup. Once again, if it was like it was meat in there, I'll let it go a little bit longer. But I think at this point, it's okay. Everything feels softer. Now I'll kind of just I'll fish out just the bay leaf.
Oh yeah, good call. You don't want to blend that in there, huh?
Yeah. And I would fish out just the stems of the thyme.
But you can leave the allspice and stuff in there, huh?
I wouldn't blend those, but those, once you blend them, they're very, very strong.
Okay.
But I leave it in there though. I leave it in the actual dish. But when I do blend some of it, I will make sure I don't put any of it in there. Obviously, if you use these kind of allspice, that's fine. But if you use a ground allspice, obviously it will kind of melt. It will obviously be like a spice in there. But these, I don't want to really blend those because they are like kind of like flavor bombs. Will take over the entire kitchen. So at this point, the lovely Vitamix. Actually, first, what I would do actually, I would add the milk in there. So added our coconut milk in there. Move it around. So once you add like milk to stuff, you never want to add it in a very like a rolling boil, because sometimes the milk itself curdles. So be careful when you add milk to certain things, especially if there's like an acid in there. It can curdle, so be very careful. So right there, turn the heat down a little bit when I added the milk. Once it kind of all incorporates in there, as you can see, I'll give it a taste again to make sure the salt level is fine.
I like the way you're tasting it too, Brandon.
Yeah.
Very professional. You don't want to just stick your used spoon into the pot.
Yeah, no, I would not do that. You know, even though at home, I would obviously like, I would do this like I'm what's in there. So I would do this, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because I'm used to doing that from back home, but so I think it tastes good. No salt in it at all. Which is why I said to you guys, before you add salt and stuff, taste it first. At this point, be careful to add the beans in there. I'm sorry, the allspice beans in there. I'll make sure none of them is in there. This is about a third. About a third of the actual dish. And any hot things, always be careful when you blend hot liquids, because they will expand because of the heat. So what you're gonna do always if you use like a Vitamix like we have right now, the top stays off, so like the steam escape, right? And if you have one of these, always keep it on off. See, mine is off right now. And sometimes with other blenders, if you put it on, the entire thing goes on like right away, right? So be careful when you do that stuff. Now you got this, I will turn this on. And just right there.
Start on the lowest speed, I would say.
Yeah, on the lowest speed. And I also got like a towel or a napkin. Just to cover the top. Because it gets like it pops up, so I don't get my hand burnt. And lowest speed. Now pulse first. Once I get like a nice, I'll turn it on. All right, so now that that's done, let's puree it up. We'll come back and add our mixture back into the pot.
Looks good, Brandon. I love doing that with soups too. Just like half blend, half keep the chunks, and it just thickens it a little bit, but just enough so that it's like a really hearty stew. So that looks great.
Exactly. So like with the tofu, Sylvia, at this point, I would take the tofu chunks and puree it with the soup mixture and add it back in there for that creamy consistency if you want to add tofu to your dish. Or like I said, you could do it where you add the tofu chunks. Like if you were doing chicken, I would add it in there now. So at this point, once again, I keep tasting my dish because I want to make sure the salt is proper. Tastes really good. So now we'll add some salt to it. Just a quick one batch of salt. I think that's fine because don't forget the if you add water to it, probably need some more salt because the water has obviously there's no thick with water. Because I had a chicken stock or sorry beef broth, there's a salt really in there. So I'll be very mindful about not adding too much salt to it. But now I have the last taste of it. It tastes really good. Add some salt. And last but not least, our spinach. I will chop in a couple small pieces and add it in there. And once again, this is the part of the recipe. Like I mentioned before, you could add stuff to it to your liking. It's really up to you. I love spinach, so I add some in there, and that's pretty much how the dish looks. Once again, the beef and stuff. If you add beef to it, I would cover this for about another hour so they cook down, get the beef nice and tender. If I add chicken to it, I add the chicken now, about a half hour. If I add the shrimp, 5 minutes, cover it, let it cook, that will be done. So if you can see how it looks now with the consistency of how thick it got, and you have some chunks of the beans is in there, you see your pumpkin is in there, obviously your carrots are in there, so you have textures in there. It's not just like a plain like all pureed soup. There's texture in there that you're gonna chew down some things. So I'll show you how to lay it up. You can keep it on there. So we have our, that's pretty much done. So we have our bowl, a nice soup. Smells good, looks good also. Some more spinach in there. And that's pretty much our soup.
Great. That looks so good. It's lunchtime here, so
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I haven't eaten yet. That looks
And that's
so
pretty much
great.
our soup.
Yum.
Different textures in there.
Great.
There
That
you go.
looks so good. So
See, it's very
Brandon, I did.
simple. Super simple, like the different textures in there. You can see that the carrots, the beans are in there. And at that point, if you want to add some, like, some spice to it, like some Tabasco, like your favorite hot sauce, you can add it now. If you want to get, like you said, Sylvia, some rice inside, you add the rice now. But I like it just this way, and
Mhm.
a spoon, a big bowl, and I'm happy that way.
Yeah, that looks great. So
Thank
I
you.
do have one quick question for you.
Sure.
Let's see. So you would add in, if you were to add in any sort of meat, you would add it in after the coconut milk or before the coconut milk?
After, after.
After. Okay, yeah, thanks for clearing that up. Cool. Yeah, and if
So
anybody else has any,
I added in after, but put the heat down very, very low. So if I did the beef, right, I cut it in very small chunks. I wouldn't add like big chunks of beef in there. I'll do very, very small chunks of beef. After I add the coconut milk in there, put the beef in there, put it in very like a medium low, cover it, and like cook that way. Not rolling boil. But everything will be after I add the coconut milk in there.
great, that's awesome. And if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to put it into the chat. Brandon is here to answer any of your burning questions. Hopefully you're not burning anything in the kitchen. But yeah, I mean, this looks amazing. And I feel like it's great for, like you said, the weather outside, it's cold. Grab a blanket and grab a bowl of soup. So that looks great. But I just want to say, thank you so much again for being with us today. I mean, we've had, oh, hey. We, we really wanted to bring to light that No Kid Hungry is here, but is what we're supporting. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. And Brandon, do you have any last words of advice or anything you want to share with anybody?
I think it froze a little bit, so I mean, technical difficulties.
Oh, okay. I just said, do you have any last words or cooking advice that you want to pass off on to others?
I mean, listen, my last thing is like, if you can, like, give something, because I think it's a really, really, really good cause. It goes to kids. Like, I have a soft spot for young people.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, if you can, whatever you can, please donate and cook more. At home, don't always buy stuff out. Cook some more.
Yeah.
Explore different things. Try different things. It's really up to you what you like. Cooking is very simple. It is very simple. It's just a matter of like when you do it. The biggest thing I tell people when you cook, doesn't always have to be on super high. The flames doesn't have to be always on high. Play the knobs. That's why they're there. Don't want everything on high. Because they always burn. So like, why this way? Because I think once you're gonna regulate the heat, I think it becomes very, very simple.
Yeah, totally. And I would say it's always, in terms of cooking more, I would say also cook for others too more. There's nothing more satisfying than like cooking a really great meal and sharing it with other people.
Right.
So, I just love everything that you do over at CAS and outside of CAS. And you have, like I said, just one of the biggest hearts I know out there. So thank you again. Thank you. And I will put the link in the chat to donate and I will share it with everybody. I'll share the replay with everybody at least. And I guess, try to join us on Monday. I'm going to do a cooking segment as well. So I will try to raise awareness and, raise some more money for No Kid Hungry. And I hope to see you on Monday. Stay tuned. And, thank you everybody involved in making this happen. I know you had a helper in the kitchen with you. Thank you very much for helping us out. And thank you for the farmers. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the farmers, the truck drivers, the food service workers out there. I know it's a tough time for everybody. So thank you again to Chef Brandon Henry for joining us today and for supporting No Kid Hungry. So good to see you, and so good to see you out there too. Bye, everybody.